So on today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through a complete tier ranking of every single commander from the Brothers War and the Brothers War precons. I'm going to be starting things off in the D tier, which is the worst tier, the least powerful commanders out there, moving up to the C tier, to the B tier, to the A tier, and finally to the S tier with the top commanders, the most powerful commanders from the set and the precons. Now, a quick disclaimer before we jump into it. Obviously, these picks are 100% based off of my own opinions, and your opinions on these commanders might differ, and that's okay. Another disclaimer is that these commanders are put into these tier rankings in a vacuum, which means that it's only in comparison to each other. These commanders are not being compared to any commanders outside of this set and the precons. So, for example, a commander from the Brothers War might be an S tier commander in this ranking, but might not be an S tier commander in another ranking, such as, if they are put into Dominator United. And with all those disclaimers out of the way, well, blame Eddie for all of Eddie's help on this episode and all the feedback and all the help during spoiler season. And if I make any mistakes, always remember, it's always Eddie's fault, not mine. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. So, starting things off in the D tier, which again is the lowest tier, is Mishra Excavation Prodigy. Mishra is a 2/1 Human Artificer with haste that costs 2 and a red and has pay 1, tap, discard a card, draw a card. And whenever you discard one or more artifact cards, add red. This ability triggers only once each turn. So Mishra does give you the ability to rummage very effectively. It does still cost a singular mana to do so, though when you discard that artifact, you are getting mana back and then some. That being said, obviously if you aren't discarding an artifact card, you don't get that same benefit, and of course, more importantly, having the tax this ability triggers only once each turn on this commander really limits its upside. Now, you still can get benefits on your opponent's turns by discarding artifacts on their turns, but of course, you've got less ways to spend your mana on their turns. So overall, again, because of that limitation, Mishra is a very lackluster commander, and it definitely belongs in the D tier. But Mishra, of course, you are not alone in the D tier, because joining you is Urza Power Stone Prodigy. Urza is a 1/3 Human Artificer with Vigilance that costs 2 and a blue, and has pay 1, tap, draw a card, then discard a card. And on top of that, whenever you discard one or more artifact cards, create a tap Power Stone token. This ability triggers only once each turn. And of course, as a reminder, a Power Stone token can tap for a colorless, and this mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. So obviously, Urza is very much like Mishra, but this one actually can loot, not hastily, but it can loot. So again, drawing that card first is going to be more impactful in a lot of situations. And again, when you are discarding artifacts, you do get a benefit, this one being a more long-term benefit, getting that tap Power Stone token. But though you can fill the board with tap Power Stone tokens, again, it is limited just once each turn, so there's that limiting factor. And again, those Power Stones cannot be used for non-artifact spells. So there is that limitation there as well. And yeah, just taking all those limitations into account, Urza, you have found yourself joining Mishra in the D tier. But also joining you in the D tier is another low-to-the-ground commander with Ashnod Flesh Mechanist. Ashnod is a 1/1 Human Artificer with Death Touch that costs a black mana, and she has, whenever she attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a tap Power Stone token. And by paying 5, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a tapped 3/3 colorless zombie artifact creature token. Overall, Ashnod is just pretty lackluster. Again, yes, a low-to-the-ground commander, but one that really doesn't do all that much for you. To get value from her, you need to send her into danger and sacrifice another creature, again, to make those Power Stone tokens. Now, she does have Death Touch, so that doesn't guarantee that your opponents won't block her, though, and if they do, sure, they lose a creature, but you're losing your commander as well. And her ability to utilize creatures out of your graveyard to make 3/3 zombies is a bit of a high cost at 5, so not very efficient. Overall, Ashnod, you do quite a few things, but none of them very effectively, and yeah, Ashnod, you have found yourself in the D tier because of all of this. Next up, though, also in the D tier is Feldon Rotom Excavator. Feldon is a 2/2 Human Artificer with haste that can't block and costs 1 in red. Feldon has, whenever it's dealt damage, exile that many cards in the top of your library, choose one of them until the end of your next turn you may play that card. So this is kind of like Impulse Draw, but it's more like Choice Impulse Draw. If Feldon is, say, dealt 6 damage, you get to choose one card out of the top 6 and utilize it until the end of your next turn. That being said, obviously in many circumstances, if Feldon is dealt 6 damage, it is taken out, and yeah, your commander can get taken out quite a bit if you keep sending it into danger by attacking with it. That being said, of course, you can utilize pinging effects to build up that temporary card advantage. Though it's a very interesting and unique design, in my opinion, Feldon just is not at the same power level as many of the other commanders from this set and the precons. So overall, Feldon, in my opinion, you are a D tier commander. Joining you in the D tier, though, is Sandwell Avenger Ace, a 3/1 human pilot for 1 and a white that says, as long as an artifact creature you control is attacking, prevent all damage to be dealt to Sandwell Avenger Ace. And whenever Sandwell becomes tapped, exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a vehicle or artifact creature spell from among them, then put the rest of them in your library in a random order. Overall, this commander really just doesn't have much going on. Sure, if you lean heavily into artifact creatures and attacking with them, you can ensure that Sandwell is for the most part protected in combat. Now, of course, there are other ways to tap Sandwell and give you access to, again, vehicles, which, vehicles are a way that you can actually tap Sandwell, but yeah, give you access to vehicles and artifact creatures. That being said, overall, this effect is just pretty lackluster, especially, again, in comparison to some of the effects that other commanders have. So, Sandwell, you have found yourself, because of all these things, in the D tier. Moving on, how about Harbin Vanguard Aviator, a 3/2 human soldier with flying that costs white-blue. It has, whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get ++1 and gain flying until end of turn. So this is a soldier tribal commander and one that is very low to the ground. That being said, in order to get that trigger, you need to be attacking with 5 or more soldiers, which can take quite a bit to build up for that effect. Now, it is a decent effect, again, allowing your creatures to get through on a lot of opponents and pumping them slightly. That being said, a simple board wipe can really throw a wrench into your plans, and you're going to have to try to build up again quickly to be able to actually even take advantage of this commander. So this commander is definitely not the most impactful one out there, and again, very susceptible to be just hampered in many ways. So overall, Harbin, you have found yourself, because of all these things, as a D tier commander. But finally, the last commander in the D tier is Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard, another 2-color low-to-the-ground commander. Hajar is a 3/3 human soldier for red-green that says, sacrifice Hajar, legendary creatures you control, get +1/+0, and gain indestructible until end of turn. So this commander can be effective at protecting and temporarily pumping in a small way your legendary tribal creatures, but other than that, there really isn't anything going on. And while it is a nice effect, again, you have to sacrifice this commander to do so, and there aren't too many ways in these colors to actually take advantage of that, like a Feign Death type of effect, that you don't really find in these colors to be able to get it back right away from your graveyard. Which means in order to really utilize this commander, you're going to have to keep recasting him from your command zone with more and more commander attacks to then, protect your team. So overall, this commander is just pretty lackluster, and that is why it is a D tier commander. Next up, though, let's move on to the C tier commanders. Not quite the bottom of the barrel, but not quite to the middle tier either. With Varid, Enterprising Salvager is our first one. It's a 3/3 human soldier for 2 and a red that says, whenever a non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a colorless artifact token named Scrap. By paying 1 and a red, we can sacrifice an artifact and choose 1. Put a +1 counter on Varid. It gains menace until end of turn. Goad target creature or discard a card, then draw a card. So this commander can essentially replace every single one of our artifacts when they are taken out or when we take them out ourselves. And while that piece of scrap doesn't technically do anything, of course we can make use of it with this commander in a variety of ways, most likely to goad our opponent's creatures or to get some card selection out of that rummaging effect. And of course, outside of our commander, there are other ways to utilize artifacts, even ones that don't have abilities themselves, or just to take advantage of the number of artifacts we have in play. That being said, while this commander is definitely not in the lowest tier, it is not even a middle tier when it comes to its power, so Varid, Enterprising Salvager, welcome to the C tier. Next up in the C tier, we've got Lauren, Disciple of History, a 3/3 human artificer that costs 3 and a white. Whenever she or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So, though this commander is pretty specific with that trigger, only triggering whenever she or a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, that is a very powerful trigger and one that you can utilize in some loops as well. That being said, it does require a good amount of setup to be able to really make the most out of this commander, and again, the limitation of this commander being a mono-white commander limits the pool of legendary creatures that you can work with, as well as other spells that you would probably want with a commander like this. So overall, a commander with an interesting and unique trigger that can definitely work well when set up properly, but it can definitely fall flat in some situations as well. So again, Lauren, you have found yourself in the C tier. Finally though, joining you in the C tier is Queen Kayla Bin-Krug. Kayla Bin-Krug is a 2/3 human noble for 1 red-white that has pay 4, tap, discard all the cards in your hand, and then draw that many cards. You may choose an artifact or creature card with mana value 1 you discarded this way, then do the same for an artifact or creature cards with mana values 2 and 3. Return those cards to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. So this commander can definitely have a unique and interesting approach to wheeling, where you discard your hand, then draw that many cards, and that can help you replace dead cards in your hand, and also take advantage of other ways to gain value from discarding cards or having cards in your graveyard. On top of that, by building around this properly, you can really make the most out of 1 mana value, 2 and 3 mana value artifacts and creatures, and get them into play essentially for overall a cheap or reduced cost. So definitely an interesting commander that can make some really cool plays, but one that in comparison to other commanders in the set and the precons just isn't quite to even that middle tier. So now let's move on to that middle tier, the middle of the road commanders at the B tier, and starting things off, we've got yet another Lauren with Lauren of the Third Path. This Lauren is a 2/1 human artificer with vigilance that costs 2 and a white. She has, when she enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, and by tapping, you and target opponent each draw a card. So first up, this commander's ETB can be very easily used and abused in a mono-white deck that can utilize blink effects. So throughout the game, you can get rid of a ton of pesky artifacts and enchantments. And of course, on top of that, this commander can provide you with a lot of card advantage throughout the game as well as that tap ability, and while doing so, aiding an opponent as well, so you can politic with this commander very effectively in many circumstances. So you can pit players against each other and also gain value while doing so. So overall, taking into account the commander's ETB, politic potential, and raw card advantage potential, Lauren of the Third Path, you are a B tier commander. Moving on, we've got Hercule Master Wizard, a 2/4 human wizard advisor that costs 1 blue. She has, at the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells that you cast this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand and put the rest from your library in a random order. So this commander definitely has a very unique way of generating card advantage. Essentially, the more types of cards that you cast outside of creature spells, the more potential you have to hit those kinds of cards off the top of your library and get them into your hand. So overall, this commander can generate you a good amount of card advantage when the deck built around it is built properly. That being said, this commander is of course limited to that trigger only on your own end step, but still the potential for drawing a lot of cards is massive. That being said, there are definitely going to be times when you whiff as well with this commander's trigger. Overall, a good solid commander that is going to fit well into the B tier. Next up in the B tier, we've got Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, a 2/3 Elf Druid Scout that costs 2 and a green. Gwenna has tap, add 2 mana in any combination of colors, spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of a creature or creature card. On top of that, whenever you cast a creature spell 5 or greater, put a +1 counter on Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia and untap it. So this commander can definitely utilize some high power creatures very effectively and very quickly. By casting creature spells that have power 5 or greater, you can keep growing Gwenna's power and untapping her to utilize her mana again. That being said, that mana again does have the restriction that you can only spend it on creature spells or abilities of creatures or creature cards. Now that does have plenty of applications, but that limitation can hold it back in some ways. Still, overall, a commander that can definitely get out of control pretty early in the game if you get off to a fast start and can be utilized to do some pretty crazy things. And if Gwenna had access to even more colors, there of course would be even more potential for it, but alas, it is a mono-green creature, and with all this taken into account, Gwenna, you are a middle-of-the-road B-tier commander. Joining you, though, in the B tier is yet another mono-green commander with Titania, Voice of Gaia. She's a 3/4 elemental with reach that costs 1 green and has, whenever one or more land cards are put in your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 more land cards in your graveyard and you both own and control Titania, Voice of Gaia, and a land named Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, exile them, then meld them into Titania, Gaia Incarnate. And of course, when they are melded, we've got Titania, Gaia Incarnate, a star elemental avatar with Vigilance, Reach, Trample, and Haste. Titania's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, and when it enters the battlefield, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. On top of that, by paying 3 and a green, you get 4 counters on target land you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. So with just the front side of this card, it's really not all that impactful of a commander, but if you are able to get Argoth in play and get lands into your graveyard, once you flip over to the backside, that can be a massive boost of power. Not just by having a commander that can obviously hit for a lot more, but obviously also by getting a ton of lands into play at once. Overall, yes, of course, it does require some setup to get there, and if you're just stuck with the front of this commander, well, you're probably not doing all that much. So, in taking all these things into account, Titania, Voice of Gaia, you've got a lot of potential when set up properly, but overall, you are a B tier commander. Next up, we've got Liberator Urza's Battle Thopter, a 1/2 Thopter with Flash and Flying that costs 3. It says you may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than Liberator Urza's Battle Thopter's power, put a +1 counter on Liberator. This is definitely a unique and interesting design that I very much enjoy. Basically, a Vedalken Orrery in your command zone for your colorless spells and artifact spells, which, in a colorless deck, that's basically all your spells. So it can add a lot of versatility to a colorless deck, and also this can become a threat itself over time if you're casting bigger and bigger spells. That being said, being in a colorless deck, you also have the most limited card pool in all of Commander. So again, while essentially having a Vedalken Orrery in your command zone can be a very powerful thing, the limited card pool that you're working with can hamper this deck in a way. So with all those factors taken into account, Liberator Urza's Battle Thopter, you are a B tier commander overall. Moving on, we've got Urza Chief Artificer, a 4/5 human artificer for 3 white, blue, black that says, Affinity for artifact creatures. Artifact creatures you control have menace, and at the beginning of your end step, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token. With this, creature gets ++1 for each artifact you control. Now, affinity for artifact creatures can definitely make this commander more affordable over time. Giving artifact creatures menace can be a great way to help try to get them through. And of course, that last trigger can also help us make an army over time that can get bigger and bigger based on the number of artifacts we control. That being said, overall this commander seems to be more of a slow and plodding commander that might take some time to really get built up. And a board wipe can be excruciating against this kind of a commander, because if your artifact creatures get dealt with, this commander does not get any cost reduction and can get very expensive very quickly. So though once you get the ball rolling, you can really take advantage of this commander and make the most of it, a simple Wrath can really throw a wrench into your battle plans. And yeah, overall, Urza Chief Artificer, you are a middle of the road commander compared to other commanders, so you have found yourself in the B tier. Next up in the B tier though, yet another Titania with Titania Nature's Force. A 6/6 elemental that costs 4 green and says you may play Forest from your graveyard. Whenever a forest enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/3 green elemental creature token, and whenever an elemental you control dies, you may mill 3 cards. So this commander, like Urza that we just talked about, is decently expensive at 6 mana. That being said, you are in green, so of course you've got plenty of fantastic ways to ramp. And by doing so, of course, by getting more and more forests into play, you can make a massive army quite quickly. On top of that, by getting access to your graveyard forests, you can get a lot of them out, especially if you've got ways to play additional lands in a turn. And of course, though a Wrath can be detrimental to you in your plan, by losing your elementals, you are able to mill yourself quite a bit. which of course can give you access to even more forests to play once you get your commander back out. So overall, a commander that can definitely pack a punch when you are set up properly and when you get things going, but can also be stopped quite easily. Overall, Titania's Nature's Force, taking all this into account, you are a B tier commander. Next up in the B tier though, we've got Tano's Solemn Survivor. A 1/3 Human Artificer for 1 in a blue that has pay 2, tap, create a token that's a copy of up to 1 target artifact token you control, mill 2 cards. And by paying 1 white, blue, black, tap, sacrifice 2 artifact tokens, exile an artifact or creature card from your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of the exiled card, except it's an artifact to its other types, activate only as a sorcery. So this commander can, in a way, cheat out massive artifacts and creatures out of your graveyard by utilizing artifact tokens to do so. And then, once you have that massive token in play, you can create token copies of it quite easily with this commander as well. And of course, if that is an artifact creature token, you've got ways to also make additional copies of that quite easily with something like a populate effect. So this commander does require some setup, but has really high upside once you are set up properly. Also, by giving you access to Esper colors, you've got some pretty fantastic effects that you can really take advantage of. So at the end of the day, with all this in mind, Tano's Solemn Survivor, you are a good commander in this set, not a great one, so you are a B tier commander. Joining you in the B tier, though, we've got yet another 3-color commander with Tocasia, Dig Site Mentor. A 4/3 Human Artificer that costs 1 green, white, blue that says, creatures you control have vigilance and tap surveil 1. And by paying 2 green, green, white, white, blue, blue, exile Tocasia, Dig Site Mentor from your graveyard, return any number of target artifact cards with total mana value 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. So once you get going, this commander can have a lot of potential. If you build up a creature army, you can utilize them to attack and swing away with that vigilance, and also use them to tap to mill a ton of cards into your graveyard essentially with that surveil, while keeping the right cards on the top of your library. And of course, there are going to be times where you actually want to get your commander into your graveyard to utilize that other ability to cheat out a ton of artifacts. So this commander can definitely be built in an eggs-like strategy where you're working to utilize artifacts again and again and again. So once that gets going, it's going to be really hard to stop, but that being said, it does require a good amount of setup. Again, you literally have to be able to get your commander into your graveyard just to actually utilize that ability. So with all this taken into account, Tocasia, you're a very interesting and unique commander, but you are definitely, in my opinion, a middle-of-the-road commander, especially in comparison to some of the others in this set in the precons. Moving on, next up is Urza, Prince of Krug, a 2/3 Human Artificer that costs 2 white, blue, and says, artifact creatures you control get +2/+2, and by paying 6, create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature and issues other types. Now that Anthem effect is nice, but the main value of this commander definitely comes with that next ability, which is quite costly, but the payoff is quite big as well. Being able to copy your artifacts is huge. That being said, there is somewhat of a limitation with that ability, not that it's just, quite costly, but also on top of that, those tokens that you're creating are also soldier creatures, and making those tokens into creatures makes them more vulnerable to removal. Or at least I should say, if it's just a regular artifact to begin with. So yes, there are definitely some broken things that you can do this commander, but also a simple board wipe, a simple Wrath of God can undo all the work that you have done, because again, making tokens does make them into creatures. So this commander can have a lot of potential once you get things going, but also again can be stopped quite easily. Overall, Urza, you are a B tier commander, and you're rounding out our B tier. But now it's time for us to move up to the A tier. Some very powerful commanders that are not quite up to the most powerful commanders of the set, but it can still pack a punch themselves. And to start us off, we've got Drafna, founder of Latinam, a 2/1 Human Artificer advisor that costs 1 in a blue that has pay 1 in a blue, return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. And by paying 3, we can tap to copy target artifact spell we control, and the copy becomes a token. So this commander has a ton of combo potential. Being able to repeatedly bounce artifacts back to our hand has a lot of implications, especially when it comes to artifacts that can be utilized to untap other artifacts, such as ones that can tap for a lot of mana. On top of that, being able to use that other ability to copy massive artifacts, that can definitely very much help us out in a lot of situations and can give us a lot of value with some massive artifacts. But yeah, the main selling point of this commander for being an A tier commander is definitely that repeatable ability to bounce artifacts, which should never be underestimated. So this commander has a ton of combo potential and is nearly to the top tier, but it has finished just below that as an A tier commander. Moving on, we've got Myrol's Shield of Argive, a 3/4 human soldier that costs 3 and a white that says, during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. And whenever Myrol's Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 color soldier artifact creature tokens for X the number of soldiers you control. That first part can be absolutely brutal and shut down your opponents essentially on your turn, so they can't do anything to stop you. So in a way, Myrol can definitely be built as a combo commander, utilizing combo pieces to win on your turn, and your opponents won't be able to stop it. But also, in just building around making a ton of soldiers, there are a lot of ways to make a lot of soldiers very quickly, and in doing so, this commander makes them doubly as effective by doubling them up, essentially, doubling your efficiency, and yeah, basically just doubling your army every single turn. So this commander can get the ball rolling quite quickly, and again, can go in a couple of different directions. If you go in a combo direction, you can be quite difficult to stop, or again, nearly impossible to stop, even on your own turn. Now, as powerful as this commander is, there are still some that are more powerful than it, but yes, in this set and in the precons, Myrol, Shield of Argive, you are an A tier commander. Moving on, next up we've got Tawnos the Toymaker, a 3/5 human artificer for 3 green/blue that says, whenever you cast a beast or bird creature spell, you may copy it, except the copy is an artifact in addition to its other types. So this commander essentially doubles up every single one of our creature spells if we build our entire deck around beasts and birds. And believe me, there are some powerful creatures out there that fit into those creature types, especially when it comes to beasts. So being able to get twice as many of those creatures, being able to double up on any of their ETBs, any of their abilities, any of their effects, can be incredible, especially since we can also take advantage of those creature tokens that we are making with effects like populate effects to make even more copies of them. Or of course, we've got access to some spells as well in Simic that allow us to essentially make all of our creatures or creature tokens into one kind, so just picking all the best of our tokens and making the most out of having an army of those creatures. So yeah, Tawnos can do some very powerful things with the right build, and in my opinion, Tawnos, you are most definitely an A tier commander. Next up, we've got Gix Yawgmoth Praetor, a 3/3 Phyrexian Praetor costing 1 black that says, whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. And by paying 4 black, discard X cards, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. So this commander encourages not only yourself, but also your opponents to swing out at your opponents. When you do so, and when they do so, they will be rewarded by drawing cards at the cost of life. So in a way, your opponents can do your dirty work for you. Now, with that said, you are giving out card advantage to your opponents, but again, at a cost, and again, at your benefit as well. And of course, that ability can be a great finisher if you hit the right things off the top of someone else's library, though it can be decently risky if you end up discarding a lot of cards out of your hand. Can definitely be a high risk, high reward play. And of course, there are ways to take advantage of the cards that you are discarding and ways to actually get those cards back as well, so keep that in mind. Overall, this commander can definitely be very effective and very powerful. It is somewhat risky in that you're helping out your opponents in a way as well, but they're helping you too. So taking all this into account, Gix, you are an A tier commander. Moving on, we've got Mishra, Tamer of Makfawa, a 4/4 human artificer that costs 3 black-red that says, permanents you control have ward, sacrifice a permanent, and each artifact card in your graveyard has unearth 1 black-red. So first up, protecting every single one of your permanents in this way can be very impactful. If your opponents are going to target your things, they're going to have to pay a big price to do so. But of course, more importantly, giving your artifacts unearth allows you to utilize them in a very effective way. So if one of your artifacts is dealt with, you can get it back out temporarily and utilize it. And of course, there are ways to make it not so temporary and ways to actually just keep that, around. But in an even bigger way, yeah, you can also just, potentially loot and discard giant artifact cards, get them into your graveyard, and then cheat them out at a much lower cost again, just 1 black-red. And actually, that cost can actually be reduced in certain ways, so it just costs even black-red to do so. So this commander can allow you to cheat on some massive artifacts, have some really big effects, and really make the most out of some ETBs as well. Overall, this commander is very effective and very impactful, and in my opinion, an A tier commander. Next up, we've got yet another Mishra in the A tier with Mishra Eminent 1. A 5/4 Human Artificer for 2 blue, black, red that says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of target non-creature artifact you control, except its name is Mishra's Warform. And it's a 4/4 construct artifact creature and its other types. It gains haste until end of turn, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So this can make temporary token copies of some of your best artifacts in play, and yeah, again, with this kind of a commander, you can really take advantage of ETBs, LTBs of certain artifacts, and just make the most out of getting extra copies of them. And like I mentioned with the previous Mishra, there are even ways to get around losing that artifact token at the end of the turn, so you can really make the most out of that effect. Overall, this commander is incredibly powerful, and once you're set up properly, can be very hard to stop, but also, in this set in the precons, there are certain commanders out there that are even more powerful than this one, so Mishra Eminent 1, you have found yourself at the A tier. Next up, how about yet another 3-color commander? We've got the Archimandrite. A 0/5 Human Advisor for 2 blue, red, white that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life for X the number of cards in your hand, -4. On top of that, whenever you gain life, each Advisor, Artificer, and Monk you control gains Vigilance and gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X the amount of life you gained. And by tapping 3 untapped Advisors, Artificers, and/or Monks you control, you draw a card. So this commander can of course do some incredibly powerful things. Just gaining life can be a massive pump to your army, and yeah, you can turn even the smallest of your creatures into a one-shot KO with the right card. That being said, the creature types that this benefit don't necessarily have the best synergies that work together with each other, again with Artificers, Advisors, and Monks. There are definitely still impactful creatures of those types, and this commander gives those a home, but you really have to lean heavily into those creature types to make the most of this commander. So overall, a very powerful commander, one that can hit exceptionally hard, but one that isn't quite to that top tier, so the Archimandrite, you are an A tier commander. But the final A tier commander is yet another Mishra with Mishra claimed by Gix. This Mishra is a 3/5 Phyrexian Human Artificer that costs 2 black-red. And it has, whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. And if Mishra claimed by Gix and a creature named Phyrexian Dragon Engine are attacking, and you both own and control them, exile them, then meld them into Mishra Lost to Phyrexia. It enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. And Mishra Lost to Phyrexia is of course the melded version. It's a 9/9. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 3. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Mishra deals 3 damage to any target. Destroy target artifact or planeswalker. Creatures you control gain menace and trample until end of turn. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Create 2 tapped Power Stone tokens. So let's tackle the front of this card first. Even with just that first part giving you an ability to drain your opponents a lot based on the number of attacking creatures, that can really add up throughout the game. So having a ton of low to the ground evasive creatures can make this commander quite deadly, even with just that front side. Now, if you are able to set yourself up though with that Dragon Engine and you are able to meld this, that backside can of course be incredibly deadly. So overall, with both sides taken into account, this is an incredibly powerful commander, just one that is just underneath that S tier. And to find out why, we'll have to talk about those S tier commanders. But again, Mishra claimed by Gix, you have yet again finished in the A tier. But now it's time for us to talk about the most powerful commanders from the set in the precons with the S tier commanders, and let's start things off with Urza, Lord Protector. Urza is a 2/4 Human Artificer for 1 white-blue that says, artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And by paying 7, if you both own Urza, Lord Protector, an artifact named the Mightstone and Weakstone, exile them, then meld them into Urza, Planeswalker, activate only as a sorcery. And on the backside, we've got Urza Planeswalker, which starts off at 7 loyalty and says, once during each of your turns, you may activate an additional loyalty ability of Urza Planeswalker. +2 artifact, instant, sorcery spells you cast this turn, cost 2 less to cast, you gain 2 life. +1, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. 0, create 2 1/1 color soldier artifact creature tokens. -3, exile target non-land permanent. And -10, artifacts and planeswalkers you control gain indestructible until end of turn, destroy all non-land permanents. So even with just the front side of this commander without melding it, this is an incredibly powerful cost reduction effect. And definitely would be in consideration for just being an S tier commander with just that. Being able to reduce the cost of especially artifacts can be an incredibly deadly and broken thing. But of course, on top of that, discounting your instants and sorcery spells can make this even more impactful, especially for a commander that is very low to the ground at just 3 mana. But of course, if you are able to get out the Might Stone and Weak Stone and meld this, the backside is quite unstoppable. And with very minimal effort, you can ultimate very quickly, and of course, make your artifacts, instant sorceries cost even less to cast so you can have some very absurd turns. So overall, yeah, Urza Lord Protector / Urza Planeswalker, you are most definitely, in my opinion, an incredibly powerful commander and worthy of being named an S tier commander. And joining you in the S tier is the only other commander that made it into this tier with Ashnod the Uncaring. Ashnod is a 1/4 Human Artificer with Death Touch that costs 2 blue, black, red. She has, whenever you activate an ability of an artifact or creature that isn't a mana ability, if one or more permanents were sacrificed to activate it, you may copy that ability, may choose new targets for the copy. So, in the past, we have definitely seen commanders that are somewhat similar to this that double up on certain specific triggers. We've seen a Panharmonicon commander with Yarok, we've seen a Death Harmonicon commander with Teysa, and now we've seen a Sacrifice Harmonicon commander with Ashnod? Regardless, there are a ton of incredibly powerful abilities from artifacts and creatures that involve sacrificing one or more permanents that we now can double up on and get double the value and double the effectiveness. So yeah, when it comes to getting double the value on all the things that you already want to do, well, this commander can very much show you just exactly how powerful this can be. So at the end of the day, Ashnod the Uncaring, you in my opinion, are definitely worthy of the title of an S tier commander from the Brothers War and the Brothers War Precons. But now that I've wrapped up the tier list rankings for the Brothers War, if you haven't seen the episode on the Golden Pig of the Brothers War, make sure you check that one out as well. Because whereas this episode was about the most powerful commanders from the Brothers War and the Precons, the Golden Pig is about my favorite commanders from the Brothers War and the Precons. So again, if you haven't seen that one, make sure you check it out. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.